Is the end of the dollar coming? And if you're Russia or China, you want the whole world to de-dollarize. And to accomplish that, the only mechanism to fast-track that is through BRICS. Now, this is a bloc whose GDP has exceeded that of the G7, and the trajectory is just widening. And this means that collectively, the BRICS nations are facilitating more trade with the world compared to the G7. And as time goes by, the bloc will gain more economic power while the West declines. Now, one side is getting richer while the other is losing ground. So the potential for de-dollarization is tremendous. The amount of trade that can shift away from the dollar is enormous. But the big question is, how long will it take, right? We are all wondering that. We have some people thinking that it'll never happen, that the dollar will remain supreme, it'll reign supreme for another 100 years. And then you have another crowd that thinks it will happen next month or next year. And this is where we need to separate fact from fiction, because the answer lies somewhere in between, somewhere in the middle. So the upcoming BRICS summit is going to be really important. It's going to set the stage for the dollar's future. And here are two biggest questions, right? Two questions that we all have. Number one, is the new BRICS currency really coming? Is the bloc creating a new common currency for trade? We've been hearing a lot of rumors of Russia now confirming that a gold-backed currency is coming. The Russian embassy has made a stunning statement. The BRICS countries are planning to introduce a new trading currency which will be backed by gold. And this is, of course, big news. If a currency is really backed by gold, it will represent a real challenge to the United States. You have a currency backed by something real instead of simply just a promise to pay and a faith of the US government, right? But is this a fact or just pure speculation? And here's the second question. It's just as important as well. Is the BRICS membership going to expand? We have at least 19 countries queuing up to join the bloc, and there are some heavy hitters on the list. We are talking about the OPEC nations such as UAE, Iran, and of course, Saudi Arabia. If a big oil producer joins BRICS this August, we will most definitely see a shift in the world order almost immediately. But there are challenges that we need to talk about. We have said many times before that de-dollarization isn't easy and it isn't simple. Now, over the past few months, we have tons of headlines about a new BRICS currency. It was supposed to be a currency that is similar to the euro, helping to facilitate trade between the BRICS countries and the world, right? But now, we have two concrete sources that tells us this isn't going to happen anytime soon. Putting up a story from Bloomberg, BRICS Bank CFO sees no move anytime soon towards a common currency. At the same time, the New Development Bank is moving to add several new members this year. So this is both a plus and a minus for the BRICS bloc. And this confirms what we've been saying for a very long time here. Creating a BRICS currency or any new common currency for that matter is going to be very difficult. It's not as simple as just gathering Putin, Xi, and Modi in a room and getting them to shake hands. It's about integrating very different economies together and getting them to abandon their sovereign currencies. Now take a look at this chart. Amongst the emerging markets, the BRICS nations accounts for 67% of the market cap, but the Chinese economy is 3 times bigger than the rest of the BRICS members combined. Trying to impose a common currency is going to be a monumental task because you need to take care of all the economies, not just China. For example, if there's a BRICS currency, it means there will have to be one BRICS central bank to control interest rates for all the countries. It will be quite similar to the ECB. And looking at the inflation rate in the Eurozone, we can see that it is at 5.5% today overall, while Spain's inflation has actually crashed below 1.9%, which is a good thing for the country. But interest rates in the EU are only at 3.5%, while inflation as a whole is 5.5%. So the ECB has to keep hiking to fight inflation, but at the same time, it will crush Spain's economy. Higher interest rates will just slow down their economy further. And that's why having a common BRICS currency is not easy. There will have to be a ton of compromises and sacrifices, and which country will get the biggest say, right? Will it be India, China, or Russia? And the Indian Foreign Minister, Jai Shankar, has also confirmed it isn't coming anytime soon. It is off the table for now. And listen to this, there's no idea of a BRICS currency. Currencies will remain a national issue for a long time to come. In fact, I must say this, guys, that launching a common currency and then screwing it up will cause more damage to the BRICS nations than any benefit. And according to the BRICS Bank CFO again, this is going to be more of a medium to long term ambition. So we shouldn't expect the bloc to launch a new currency or even a gold backed one, because that is even more complicated than a fiat currency. And if it happens, it will take many years or even a decade or two to really materialize. But let's talk about the new members joining the bloc. There's more hope here, and this is frankly the more important news. Now, there are over 30 countries knocking at the door of BRICS, countries from Indonesia to Algeria. They've expressed interest in becoming a member. But to be realistic, not all countries will be admitted. So here's my guess. At most, maybe one or two countries will join the bloc either this year or the next. And why is this? Because there could be some conflict between China and India. India is wary of China's BRICS expansion plans. Remember that India is part of the Quad, a group that is formed to act as a check against China. And this includes the United States, Australia, and Japan. In fact, the US is planning to establish naval logistic hubs in India, as well as advancing cooperation in technology and green energy. So India is probably just waiting it out to see how the cooperation with the United States will go. And this means any new members to the BRICS will have to benefit all member countries and not just China. Even if China has the biggest economy in the bloc, India's bargaining power is rising, so things aren't that simple anymore. And that's why India has called the BRICS expansion a work in progress. There will have to be standards, criteria, and procedures done before expanding the group any further. Now, the good thing is that we can now narrow down the candidates. Just think to yourself, what does the BRICS bloc want the most? Which countries are most likely to benefit every member of the bloc? And when you analyze further, there are only three countries or so that really make immediate sense. They are Saudi Arabia, Iran, and the UAE. Now, these are some of the biggest oil producers in the world. In 2022, Saudi Arabia accounted for 12% of the world's oil production, while the UAE and Iran produced 4% each. This means if these countries join BRICS, they will have more control of the oil markets. It will essentially be a powerhouse marriage between OPEC and Asia, and collectively, BRICS Plus will have huge control of the energy markets and all the exports, outstripping the G7 production by quite a big margin. And this is important for the case of de-dollarization. If you're trying to challenge the dollar, you will need to have a big incentive to really drive change. And I think we have seen this chart 1,000 times now, right? It shows the dollar's use as the reserve currency going down. It has dropped from 66% in 2014 all the way down to 58% today. And that means central banks are holding fewer dollars in their reserves. But that's one key reason why the dollar is still supreme today. Even though the United States has thrown around all these financial sanctions, the world is still addicted to the dollar. And here's why. The world has issued too much debt that are denominated in US dollars. According to the Federal Reserve, over 60% of foreign currency debt is priced in dollars. Countries issue bonds denominated in the reserve currency because it lowers borrowing costs for them and it attracts more buyers. But here's the big problem. He has trapped them in the dollar system, and this feeds into the demand for more dollars by countries and even companies in order to pay back their bondholders. This is the real debt trap. Here's how bad the situation really is. There's at least $65 trillion in unrecorded dollar debt circulating in the financial system. This means entities outside of the United States owe each other 65 trillion worth of US dollars. And that's why the only way the BRICS nations can even challenge the system is through the commodity markets, not the debt or not the financial markets. They can't win there. The feedback loop the United States has created is just too strong. The dollar matrix and the legacy system is truly hard to overcome. And the only way it will break is if one day the US government completely defaults on their debt. And I really doubt that will happen because Jerome Powell can always simply print money and inflate it away. So we need to have a nuanced understanding of the situation. De-dollarization is going to take a long time, but the dominoes are really starting to fall. In a story by Reuters, Indian refiners start yuan payments for Russian oil imports, and this is a big deal. We have Indian Oil Corp, the country's biggest buyer of Russian crude, paying in yuan for their purchases in June. And why is this happening? Because Indian refiners are afraid of American sanctions if they use dollars to buy up Putin's oil. Plus, Russia also wants yuan to buy more stuff from China. It's quite plain and simple. So Indian banks, they are wary of clearing payments for such imports. Apparently in May, the State Bank of India rejected a Russian oil payment in dollars. They refused to clear it. But Indian refiners are still paying in yuan for the oil. Why is that happening? Because the discount is very attractive, so it made sense to pay in the Chinese currency. And this shows that if incentives are big enough, countries in the BRICS nations will conduct more bilateral trade. even if it's in another member's currency. So de-dollarization is going to flourish not through a common currency, but through bilateral trade outside of the dollar. That is the path of least resistance. And if we extrapolate this out, right, we can see that the new members admitted into the BRICS will likely be major oil producers, because what they bring to the table is extremely valuable, a commodity that every country on earth really needs. And the most likely candidate is going to be Saudi Arabia. Now, the Saudis themselves have already expressed interest in joining the BRICS Bank, and this is one big step towards full BRICS membership. And according to the FT, the addition of the kingdom would reinforce ties between the bank, which was established by the world's biggest developing economies, as an alternative to Western-led Bretton Woods institutions and the world's second largest oil producer. So it's not that the dollarization has stopped, it's just BRICS making a careful step forward in the process. And this process will take as long as it needs to, guys. The first countries to fast forward this will be, of course, Russia and China. And during the recent SEO summit, Putin told the world to trade with Russia using their own local currencies and not the dollar. He's going to de-dollarize the whole country. And if you want Russian oil, you want Russian gas or wheat, you need to be using something other than the US dollar, right? And listen to these statements from Putin, and you'll quickly realize that Russian resolve is strong. I would like to stress that Russia is confidently resisting and will continue to resist external pressure, sanctions, and provocations. And he goes on to add, over 80% of commercial transactions between Russia and China are made in rubles and yuan. But here's the kicker, the share of the Russian national currency in export transactions with all the SCO countries exceeded 40% in 2022. So Russia is aggressively trading with the rest of the SCO, which is over 40% of the world in Russian rubles. They are bypassing the reserve currency in commodity trade. And whether you like it or not, Russia is still standing. They are not collapsing yet. And this shows the way forward. It won't be establishing a common currency or even a go back one. It is still too soon. But the road ahead will be lots of bilateral trade conducted away from the dollar. And the big game changer is going to be the BRICS expansion, especially from the oil producers. Even Venezuela, which has the largest proven oil reserves in the world, has expressed interest to join BRICS. They are tired of the Western sanctions and they want to do business with the future of the world. The demand for energy in the BRICS bloc will only grow and grow. So let's set our expectations right for this BRICS summit. I highly doubt there'll be a common currency or go-back currency coming. Now, if a big oil producer joins the bloc, then that is a big win. Maybe Saudi Arabia, maybe it's the UAE, who knows, right? But at the very least, if they establish a well-defined criteria for BRICS membership, then it is good progress. But let me know what you think in the comments below, guys. Will BRICS expand their membership in August? And what does this mean for the dollar? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe. Be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.